You're in the wrong seat, old ape. Economy's in the back. Elias Vance stood in the aisle of Horizon Air's Flight 610 to Auckland, ticket in hand, staring at the young man lounging in seat 2C. The man in a sleek gray suit sipped champagne, not bothering to look up. Elias, 72, dressed in a worn fisherman's sweater and scuffed boots, looked entirely out of place. "That's my seat," he said quietly. The man smirked. "Upgraded this morning. Must be a glitch." Passengers watched, murmuring. None knew Elias on the airline. Today he wasn't the CEO. He was here to test his company's integrity, and it was failing fast. "I booked this seat 3 weeks ago," Elias said, showing his ticket. "Unless you've got proof beyond that paper," the man replied. "You're out of luck." A flight attendant arrived. Chloe, mid-30s, polished, composed. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Eyes on Elias, not the suited man. "He's in my seat," Elias said. Bryce Sterling, the name on the man's tag, raised his phone with a digital pass. Chloe barely glanced at Elias's ticket. "System error. Happens sometimes. We have a nice seat in row 14. Her tone was polite but dismissive. Bryce smiled, victorious. Elias folded his ticket and walked toward the back, disappointment outweighing anger. The test had only begun. From row 14, Elias watched Bryce laugh into his phone. "Yeah, handle some old guy trying to steal my seat." Chloe passed again. "Something to drink, sir?" she asked, coldly professional. "Water, please." She handed him a half-filled cup, then stopped by Bryce. "Mr. Sterling, more champagne?" "Absolutely," Bryce grinned. Elias said nothing. A few rows ahead, an older black woman with silver hair met his eyes, shaking her head. Her name was Mora. "Excuse me," she said aloud. "That man had the seat first. Why didn't you check the system?" Chloe's smile stiffened. "We've resolved the issue, ma'am." "Resolved? You mean you assumed?" "Ma'am, please don't interfere. Don't talk to me like that," Morris said, steady and unafraid. Chloe's tone hardened. "If you continue disrupting, I'll have to ask you to deplane." Silence spread. Mora met Elias's gaze. He gave a slight nod. "Thank you, but be careful." Then Bryce's voice rose again. "You know what your problem is, old man? You people always think you're being discriminated against. But truth is, you don't belong here." The words hit the air like a slap. "You people." No one moved. "Look at you," Bryce sneered. "Probably saved up for months. Trying to scam first class and cry racism when you're caught." Elias didn't move. He lifted his phone, photographed his boarding pass, started a voice recording. Mora raised her phone, too. Recording, steady, defiant. Chloe appeared again. "Sir, you can't record without consent. Is public humiliation against policy?" Elias asked softly. She hesitated, then looked away. He lowered the phone, but kept recording, opening his laptop instead. Each word, each action, he documented everything. Mora leaned forward. "They really don't know who they're dealing with, do they?" Elias allowed himself a faint smile. "Not yet," he murmured. Bryce, still performing for his phone, said loudly, "Yeah, some old black guy tried to steal my seat. Always complaining." A man in the next row, Grant, turned. "Yo, I heard that. Old dude really thought he could sit up here." "Never been in first class," Bryce said. "Doesn't get how it works." "Hey, Pops," Grant added. "You even know what titanium elite means? My boys earned it. You? Probably your first time up front." Mora stood abruptly. "That's enough. You both should be ashamed." Another attendant, Leo, appeared with Chloe. "Folks, please sit down. We're preparing for departure." She started yelling. Grant said, pointing. "I did not yell," Mora replied calmly. "I told the truth." "Ma'am, if you can't remain calm, we'll have to ask you to deplane," Leo said. Elias shut his laptop, his patience eroding. He connected to the Wi-Fi, opened the internal airline system, verified seat data, and began typing. 2. Legal Department Board of Directors. Subject: urgent racial discrimination incident on Flight 610. CEO witnessed firsthand. Immediate executive action required. He attached the recordings, photos, and notes, listing employee names and passenger details, then pressed send. The cabin door opened. Captain Dixon emerged, face grave. Behind him walked a woman in a tailored charcoal suit. Naomi Sterling, Chief Operating Officer, Bryce's aunt. Conversation died instantly. Naomi approached row 14 and stopped before Elias. "Mr. Vance," she said, voice clear, respectful. "On behalf of Horizon Air's leadership, I deeply apologize for the inexcusable treatment you've endured." Every head turned toward her, realization dawning like sunlight through clouds. Bryce's smirk froze, his color draining as he understood who the quiet old man really was. Elias said nothing, only inclined his head slightly, eyes steady on Chloe, Bryce, and the others who had watched and done nothing. The flight was silent except for the faint hum of the engines starting up. His test nearly complete, its verdict already written. The words struck the cabin like thunder. Bryce froze, champagne glass halfway to his lips. Mr. Vance. Chloe went pale. Leo stiffened by the galley, speechless. Captain Dixon stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Elias Vance, chairman and majority owner of Horizon Air. He founded this airline 30 years ago on one principle: that every passenger deserves dignity and respect, regardless of race, age, or appearance. The cabin gasped. Bryce's glass slipped, champagne spilling across his suit. Naomi Sterling, the COO, stood beside the captain, her voice calm but cutting. Mr. Vance traveled anonymously to see how our values hold up in practice. Today they failed. Elias rose slowly. The frail old man had vanished. In his place stood the founder of the empire they were flying in. His gaze moved to Chloe. She trembled. He said nothing. He didn't have to. Then he faced Bryce, walking up the aisle until he stood beside seat 2C. Bryce shrank into the leather, arrogance stripped away. I didn't want anyone to know who I was, Elias said softly, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. I wanted to see how my employees treated a passenger with no influence, no wealth, just a ticket, and how other passengers behaved when they thought no one important was watching. Today, I saw her out where there should have been respect. Naomi's tone hardened. Miss Chloe Parker, Mr. Leo Hammond, you are both terminated, effective immediately. You failed to uphold company policy and allowed discrimination to take place under your supervision. Her eyes moved to Bryce. Mr. Bryce Sterling, you are permanently banned from this airline and all partner carriers. Your frequent flyer account is suspended, and the incident will be reported to the FAA and the Bureau of Civil Rights. Hate speech and racial harassment aboard a commercial flight are violations of federal law. Bryce's face turned ashen. Wait, I didn't mean, you didn't know. Naomi cut him off. You didn't know that degrading someone because of their race was wrong? She turned to his companion. Mr. Grant Thompson, you are suspended from flying with us for 3 years. Your behavior was complicit and disrespectful. Airport security entered quietly. Naomi gestured to them. These 2 passengers need to be escorted off. The officers approached. Bryce rose shakily, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry, he muttered. Elias looked at him without anger. You're sorry you were caught? Not for what you did. Maybe now you'll think before deciding someone else doesn't belong. Bryce and Grant walked down the aisle under silent stares. Chloe and Leo followed, their badges removed, their careers finished. Mora, the woman who had spoken up, sat quietly, eyes steady, saying nothing. Her silence carried more weight than any speech. When the door closed, the cabin remained hushed. Elias returned to seat 2C, the seat that had always been his. Outside, the engines began to roar. He smoothed his worn sweater and looked out at the rain-streaked glass. When the seatbelt sign turned off, he stood and faced the passengers. I want to say something, he began, voice calm, eyes scanning the faces before him. What happened today wasn't about a seat. It was about dignity. I saw what I've spent my life fighting against. The quiet cruelty that hides behind manners. But I also saw courage. One woman chose to speak when silence would have been safer. That's how change begins. He paused, letting the words settle. Dignity isn't determined by your seat, your status, or your skin. It's determined by how you treat people when you think no one's watching. I built this airline because I was tired of being invisible, tired of watching others made to feel invisible. I promise you, that ends today. His voice softened. Kindness costs nothing, but its worth is immeasurable. The plane lifted into the sky. Elias sat back, finally at peace. Unbeknownst to him, passengers had recorded everything. By the time they landed, the story had gone viral. News outlets hailed it as a reckoning for corporate culture and everyday decency. The hashtag #FlyWithDignity trended worldwide. Horizon Air stocks surged, not from sympathy, but from renewed trust. The airline announced sweeping reforms, including mandatory empathy and bias training led personally by Elias. Mora was offered a consulting position to help design new passenger experience protocols. The incident became a landmark case in ethics training, reminding millions that power reveals itself not in how we lead, but in how we listen. And as Flight 610 disappeared into the clouds, Elias Vance closed his eyes, knowing his legacy had just taken flight again. Not built on profit, but on principle.